Hello everybody, welcome back to Access Blockbusters and welcome to the Access Blockbusters 1000 subscriber Ask Me Anything AMA. Today's video is going to be a little bit more laid back, maybe a little bit more so than my videos about Marvel or Star Wars or DC. I'm just going to be answering your guys' questions, and thank you all to those who submitted questions for the AMA. I really do appreciate it because this channel, guys, 1,000 subscribers, I mean, it's amazing. It means so much to me, but it means so much to me because of you guys. It means so much because of the community that we've been able to create. And shameless plug, but speaking of community, we've created a Discord server. If you want to join, check out the link in the description down below. But everyone on there has been amazing. We've been talking about movies. We've been talking about our opinions, recommendations, Marvel, Star Wars, DC. It's been so much fun. And I just have to thank you guys so much again. I know I've been saying it almost every single video since 1,000 subscribers, but I genuinely mean it. And so today I'll be answering all the questions that were submitted for the AMA. There are quite a few questions. Some of you guys submitted a lot, and I'm really thankful for that. And I'm really excited to get into them. There are some really great questions here. All of you guys submitted awesome questions, and so I can't wait to get into it. So if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and if you'd like me to make this a regular thing, I might make this a regular thing, doing AMAs maybe once or twice a week, maybe once or twice a month, but I'm really enjoying this, and so I hope you are as well. Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and let's get into your questions. I'm going to go in no particular order. In fact, I have no idea how YouTube is organizing these comments, so if your comment or question comes first or second or last, it really doesn't mean anything. I just wanted to let you guys know. First question is from Gloria7072, and they simply ask, how are you? And I gotta tell you, I'm doing great. There are a lot of things going on right now in my life. It's very busy, but I have to say that everything's going well. I can't complain about things. There's obviously some stress, and there's obviously some anxiety, and a lot of other things that are going on with big changes, but I'm just very happy to be in the place that I am. I think that over the past couple of years, we've seen the YouTube channel in particular, just specifically talking about Access Blockbusters, grow a lot, and it's become such a joy to see all the videos do well and see all the engagement that you guys bring to it. And so on the YouTube front, I'm doing great. I'm just hoping to continue upwards and onwards. And on the personal side, just adapting to new environments, new changes, and it's been really exciting. And so I have to say right now that I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking that question. It's a lovely question to start off this AMA with. Next question up is from Anthony Chobot, does Pop Culture 7762, and they ask, what is your favorite MCU movie? My favorite MCU movie is still Infinity War. I think Infinity War is the pinnacle of the MCU. I think there are a lot of reasons as to why. You can go check out some of my other videos, and I know they're older videos, and so the rankings and the tier lists and all that kind of stuff, they may not be the exact same as they are now, but I can tell you the one thing that has stayed the same is that Infinity War is still my favorite, because I think that one of the things that I love about Infinity War is that they were able to make it a sort of a part one, if you will, and this is one of my complaints about a lot of movies these days, that they like to do the part one thing. I have not seen Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 yet, so I don't know if this movie, falls into that category, but all these part ones decide to just sort of stop the story in the middle. But Infinity War had this sort of Herculean task of bringing all the MCU characters together and bringing Thanos to the big screen, which they did incredibly well. But not only bringing Thanos to the big screen, but making him the central antagonist and I would say even the protagonist of the film. Because I think if you watch Infinity War, it is Thanos' story. The directors and writers have said as much, and I think that you can clearly tell. So that if you watch the movie, I would contend that there's no way you can say Infinity War is an incomplete film, because you follow the character arc of Thanos, not the Avengers. And I think that's just brilliant. I think the action scenes are great for the most part. I think that the CGI in certain places is not as great, but still I can get over that. I think the character development, while obviously not as strong as maybe an Endgame where there are some deeper character moments, I think that the character development is necessary, and where it is, it's very good. And I think that the character interactions are great. I think that the stakes are really high. And I just think it's a masterclass in how to make a good movie villain. Not just an MCU villain, but I think just a good movie villain in general. So Infinity War is still my favorite MCU movie. Thank you so much for the question. The View with Drew 9322 asks, what superhero movie do you like more, Spider-Man No Way Home or Logan? Now that's a really interesting question, because those are two movies that I don't think are compared all that often, although they probably appear on many people's top superhero movie lists. But I hadn't really thought about those movies in comparison before, so it's a really interesting question. I had to think about that for a second, and I'm still going to say Logan. Now, I think what is so difficult about that question for me is that I think Spider-Man No Way Home is obviously the more rewatchable film, because I think that there are just elements of the action and the humor and the charisma, but also the moments, right, within Spider-Man No Way Home that make it so rewatchable and so memorable. And, you can't forget the theater experience, right? I can never forget the theater experience of Spider-Man No Way Home, just seeing Tobey and Andrew come in, seeing all the villains. But I think underneath that, there is a, very compelling story with Spider-Man No Way Home. It's not just a fluff film. And it is, still near the top for me of the MCU. So I'm not discrediting Spider-Man No Way Home. That being said, while Logan is obviously not the most rewatchable film, I mean, maybe for some people, but not for me, just because of the heaviness and the darkness of the film, I think that it truly is a masterclass in how to do a character study in the comic book movie genre. And I think that it has, I believe, two of the single best performances in any comic book movie ever. And I think that you'd find it very hard to dispute that amongst a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying that that's a fact, obviously, but Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and / Logan in Logan is just phenomenal. And Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier in Logan as well, I think gives, I'm not going to say a better performance because Hugh Jackman has to carry the entire movie, but those two in that movie are just spectacular. I think then the themes as well about just sort of learning to love again and learning to live again, and Logan finding love and purpose again in the last few minutes of his life with his daughter X-23. I just think that the film embodies so much of what superhero movies and comic book movies can be, which is truly beautiful art. I'm not saying that superhero movies can't be beautiful art. I'm saying that a lot of them aren't necessarily aspiring to be that sort of auteur or Oscar kind of caliber movie, which is fine. Like, I don't need, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 to be the next Oscar nominated movie. I'm just saying that it's refreshing to see a movie like Logan do it so well, and obviously have actors give performances like that. So I'm going to say Logan. My opinion might change, but I think Logan is my favorite movie out of the two. The View with Drew also asks, have you seen 2003's Daredevil or Ghost Rider, and do you have thoughts on them? I unfortunately have not seen the older Ghost Rider or Daredevil films. It's probably something I will do eventually, although I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard very mixed things, obviously, about both. And that's not to say that I won't love the films if I see them, but I just, frankly, I have a lot of other things I need to watch currently. Just this year, I have a whole list of things that I need to catch up on, not to mention previous years, not to mention rewatching some things for the YouTube channel, hint, hint, wink, wink. We'll see what that turns into. But anyways, so it's not that I don't necessarily want to watch them. It's just that, having heard the mixed reactions about those films, and I know, like, if you personally love those films, that's amazing. And if enough of you just absolutely love those older films, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will definitely rewatch them. Or, sorry, watch them for the first time. But for now, I just don't think that they're as high on my priority list, and so I have not seen them yet. I probably will eventually. I don't know when eventually will be, and I'll let you know my thoughts at that point. NRMT7CS asks, what's a question or topic that doesn't get talked about enough in the MCU? That's a fascinating question, because there are obviously things we want to talk about all the time, whether or not the MCU is dying, whether or not the MCU still has, legs, whether or not the multiverse saga is a good thing, what's going on with the multiverse saga, all these sorts of new heroes being introduced and what's going on. But a question or topic that doesn't get talked about enough is something that I have to, frankly, think about for a second. Because obviously all the things that you want to talk about, both positive and negative, the massive success of the MCU, but also the concerns about the future, those are the things that everyone wants to talk about. So in thinking about something, it's not a question necessarily that came to mind, but a topic that I think not a lot of people, talk about these days, at least. It's something that I think is worth bringing up again, because it's just important to remember as we head into Phase 5 and Phase 6 that, the MCU is maybe not as strong as it used to be, and what's going on with, the multiverse and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to point out that one of the things that the MCU was built on, and I just simply don't think it gets talked about enough, especially now with all of the fan casts about, the Fantastic Four. And by the way, I've also made videos about the fan casting of the Fantastic Four. I think it's fun. It's really fun to speculate and all that kind of stuff. But we have to remember, the MCU was built on the likes of Robert Downey Jr., who was coming off of, very controversial and very negative, not press is the wrong word, but you guys know what I mean. There was a lot of negativity surrounding Robert Downey Jr. when he was cast as Iron Man. And, obviously, look how that turned out. Chris Evans was virtually unknown other than maybe Johnny Storm, and obviously that's not a great thing. Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston were unknowns. Edward Norton, obviously didn't, last, but Mark Ruffalo was also pretty much relatively unknown at the time. Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, they were up-and-coming actors in the business. And so, I think it's important to remember that every like for the major movies towards the beginning, I think almost all of them never relied on prestige. Obviously, Samuel L. Jackson was the big sort of headline actor in the first Avengers movie, but they never relied on prestige for actors. They always got the actors that were best for the roles. And I think you see that, through the success of the Infinity Saga. Like Elizabeth Olsen, when she was cast as Wanda Maximoff, she's not the actress that she is today. She clearly is not the actress. And I know the MCU sort of made her into the household name that she is today. But I mean, that's just a clear example. I think Paul Bettany is another great example of an actor who wasn't really talked about as much before. Obviously, he still, had notable roles. But Paul Bettany is another example as Vision. You had the entire Guardians of the Galaxy cast. Maybe Zoe Saldana notwithstanding, but, having Chris Pratt come in, having Dave Bautista come in, I think I hope that as we head into the next few phases of the MCU and we start casting X-Men and Fantastic Four and all the other people in the MCU, that we're not just going to gravitate towards the big name, right? I think that what James Gunn has done by casting Superman and casting David Corenswet, is that, it's not like we're casting, Leonardo DiCaprio as Superman, because that's going to create buzz and that's going to, he's the big name actor. And obviously, an actor of the caliber like Leonardo DiCaprio would give an amazing performance as any character in a comic book movie. I just think that what we don't talk about enough these days in the MCU is that the casting has been spot on, at least towards the beginning. And I think still in the movies and TV shows you don't like, think about Black Widow, think about Florence Pugh, think about David Harbour. I think that those two were standouts in Black Widow, and they'll be returning in Thunderbolts. And then you got your Haley Steinfelds and Iman Vellani, who was an unknown before Ms. Marvel. So I think it's important for us just to trust the casting process. And I'm hoping that, if the reports were or weren't true that Marvel was targeting Adam Driver and Margot Robbie for the Fantastic Four, that it wasn't just purely for name recognition. And I'm going to trust Sarah Finn, I believe that's her name, the casting director for Marvel, that she knows what she's doing. So that's an excellent question. I know I went off on that for a long time, but it's something that I think I wanted to talk about here. So thank you so much for that question. Supervise, great friend of the channel. Thank you so much, as always, for submitting questions and supporting the channel. I just appreciate it so much. Supervise asks, David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan cast as Superman and Lois. And it's crazy how David Corenswet's going to be the face of the DCU? I don't know what it's going to be called, but for the next 10 plus years. Thoughts on the casting? Great question. I personally like them because, like I mentioned just previously, Rachel Brosnahan obviously is very well known for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She's obviously not a household name. She's not like a name that everybody knows off the top of their head. And obviously David Corenswet, even more so, right? And I don't think hardly anybody knew David Corenswet before Superman. So I'm excited for them because I think that, I don't care about looks. Obviously David Corenswet looks a lot like what we think a Superman should look like. And he reminds you very much of Henry Cavill, I think, at least, in physicality-wise. But obviously, that's not the most important thing, right? Like, you don't have to look like the comic book character to embody the comic book character. Obviously, tried and true example, but Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine looks nothing like what we thought the comic book character would look like in 2000. So when the first X-Men came out. So I think that it's great that they both look like they could be Superman and Lois, but I also think that I'm excited because they seem like very talented actors. Rachel Brosnahan, obviously, with acclaim for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I'm excited just because I think that these are actors who can really make a name for themselves within common households and become truly great actors based on their roles. And it is crazy. David Corenswet has a lot on his shoulders being the face of the DCU, but I'm positive that he's going to do a great job. I'm really excited for them. Thanks for the questions. Duskast Knight asks, and by the way, I apologize so much if I butchered anybody's names, including yours, because I frankly am just terrible with them. But they ask a lot of questions, and I really appreciate that, so we're going to go through them one by one. So the first question that they ask is, what are your top 5 favorite films of all time? I know, impossible question. It is an impossible question. Even if I had sat down and made a list of every single film that I'd ever seen, or even just thought about all the films that I'd seen, it would be very hard. Very, very, very hard for me to come up with a top 5 favorite films of all time. So what I'm going to do instead is just give you 5 films, I think one from sort of each major franchise or genre that I happen to really like. And actually, you know what? It might even just be more than 5. I'm just going to give you a bunch of films from different categories of movies that I really like myself. So favorite mystery movie has to be Knives Out. I know that's recency bias, but I can't remember, loving a movie more than I did with Knives Out. Favorite animated film, I would say, is Inside Out. I think Inside Out is one of, I think, just the most beautifully made films of all time. But I know a lot of people don't actually like Inside Out as much as I do, and so that might be not as popular of a take, but I love Inside Out. Favorite superhero movie? I think I've answered this before or earlier in the video, but it's Infinity War. I think, though, I admit Infinity War may not be the most profound or prolific movie ever made, but I love what they did in that movie. And I think that what it embodies, I think that and Endgame put together as one sort of big movie, I love it. Favorite sci-fi fantasy films, I would say, are probably the Lord of the Rings films. I'm not as big of a fan as many people are. Like, I haven't read The Silmarillion and I haven't watched every single extended edition, every single minute of it. But I mean, those films are just undeniably so well made. Every time I sit down and do a rewatch of all of them, it's the emotion and the stakes and the epicness of those films are unbelievable. And here's a random one because I can't really think of many more categories, honestly. I'm a big baseball fan, by the way, so this might surprise you guys, but I'm a huge baseball fan. So favorite sports movie is Moneyball. Love Moneyball. As I've said many times, I'm not a huge cinephile, so I know that is a completely unsatisfactory answer because it didn't answer anything that you were asking for. But I just wanted to take, some time to really reveal some films that I personally love. I'm not a classic film buff or anything like that. These are obviously more recent movies, but yeah, that's me. Thanks for the first question. Second question, what are your top 3 DCEU movies? That's a good question. I think actually that's fairly simple. I think number 1 is The Suicide Squad. Completely just went under everyone's radars because of the pandemic, which is understandable, but clearly didn't go under the radars of Warner Brothers because they gave the keys to the proverbial kingdom to James Gunn. So there you go. So number 1 is The Suicide Squad. Number 2 is probably, I think it's Shazam. Although I could be convinced otherwise, I could switch 2 and 3. I think Shazam, I enjoy Shazam a lot. I think that it embodies a lot of just the good spiritedness of what I like comic book movies to be generally. I love Logan, so I love darker comic book movies, but I did enjoy Shazam quite a bit. Number 3 is Wonder Woman. I think Wonder Woman is a very solid movie. I would put it in a tie maybe with Zack Snyder's Justice League. In fact, any given day, just based on the fact that Zack Snyder's Justice League is 4 hours long, and it's honestly, it's a lot to watch, but I enjoyed watching it, and I've only seen it once. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, is just sort of a snappier film that kind of falls apart at the end, but I did quite enjoy Wonder Woman. So I would go The Suicide Squad, I would go Shazam, and then I would go Wonder Woman, edging out Zack Snyder's Justice League just by a little bit. Sorry, Snyder fans. That's nothing personal, but I like Wonder Woman. So those are my top 3. Thanks for that question. Next question from Duskast Knight is, what is your favorite Batman film? That's a great question. I think that Here's an unpopular opinion. Here's a very unpopular opinion. It's not The Dark Knight. I very much enjoy The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight is a masterclass in how to tell a grounded, gritty, yet realistic, and even inspiring and hopeful superhero film with great performances, obviously, by the late Heath Ledger and Christian Bale. And I think that it's just a wonderfully made film. I really enjoy every time I see The Dark Knight. However, in that trilogy, it's not my favorite. And I'll get back to the Nolan trilogy. I would also place the Batman maybe on par, maybe slightly under. I'll say the Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman, is slightly under. I think the Batman suffers from being a little bit too long and a little bit too bloated and maybe self-indulgent at certain times, but I love the Batman, really love the Batman. And again, just going back to the Nolan trilogy, I think that there's a film in there that's better, and it's Batman Begins, for me. I think Batman Begins ever so slightly edges out The Dark Knight. Every time I watch the Dark Knight trilogy, it surprises me because I'm always thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to like The Dark Knight the most. But every time I start the trilogy, and I started out with Batman Begins, I end up going, wait, this movie's amazing. I don't know quite what it is. Maybe I just love the origin story aspect of that Batman film, but I think Batman Begins is just a phenomenal movie. So I'm going to say, for me, it's going to be Batman Begins. Next question related to that, who is your favorite Batman? That's a hard question. I like elements of all of the Batman that I've seen. I mean, I think for me, obviously, as someone who didn't grow up watching the Keatons and the Kilmers and the Clooneys, it's hard for me to pick any one of them, even though I respect a lot of what, each one of them did. I mean, respect Clooney in the sense that he did those movies, but it would be obviously between Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, and Robert Pattinson. I like parts of Ben Affleck, I really do, and I think that Ben Affleck has sort of, I think that there are elements of the character that speak to me, sort of the grizzled Batman that we were promised, but then I think that it's hard for me to pick Ben Affleck because I haven't seen him be in projects that I particularly love, you know? And so it's hard for me to pick Ben Affleck. I think Christian Bale is incredibly solid, you know, incredibly solid. And I think that he does everything he's asked to do in the Dark Knight trilogy. And I think Robert Pattinson is a phenomenal Batman. I think he's my favorite Batman. So if you're asking me just purely who my favorite Batman is, it's probably Robert Pattinson. But I have a feeling that in your question, you're encompassing, you know, Bruce Wayne into that as well. And I think that out of the three of those actors, Robert Pattinson is the weakest Bruce Wayne. And so for that reason alone, I will give it to Christian Bale. But again, do not be surprised when the Batman 2 comes out, and, you know, maybe at the end of the Batman 3, that Robert Pattinson becomes my favorite Batman. Shout out also to Kevin Conroy, just an incredible voice actor and incredible as Batman as well. I just, you know, it's hard for me to kind of put Kevin Conroy over like a Christian Bale, but again, I love Kevin Conroy as well. So that's my answer to that question. Next question is a really interesting one. Do you think the Hawkeye show would have benefited as being a movie, and do you think that it would also have benefited without featuring Kingpin? Now that's an interesting question, because I don't think a lot of us have thought about the Hawkeye show in quite a bit, but it's you know, it's a fun question to visit. So here are my thoughts on Hawkeye from what I remember. Hawkeye is a very fun show to me. I stand by the fact that while it has its problems, and I mean, what Disney Plus MCU show doesn't have its problems? Even my beloved WandaVision has its problems. But Hawkeye is a show with problems, for sure, but I enjoy it a lot. I really do. So if you're going to ask me, should it have been a movie? I think that it's possible it could have been a movie. I think if you make, you know, like for those people who are arguing Hawkeye, you know, what is there to make a Hawkeye movie about? I mean, you made a very successful Black Widow film. And so by successful, I mean, you know, obviously it didn't make the most money in the MCU. It was obviously coming out of the pandemic. But I just mean like a very solid, you know, critically and audience rated Black Widow film that obviously it's not everyone's favorite MCU film, but it was a very solid film. And I think you could have made what that Hawkeye story was in the TV show into a movie. I don't think, though, when I think back on Hawkeye, that it was the show that made me think this really could have been a movie. I think more of shows like, I probably miss Marvel. I think of shows like Moon Knight, for example. Moon Knight, I think, is a show that was just so confused, and no pun intended, obviously, based on the character. I think it was a show that really just kind of was meandering for a while, and then it had some really grand ideas that just should have been focused up into a couple hours. I think obviously the big one for me is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier needed to have been a movie. I don't see any reason why it was a show other than, well, these characters aren't as well known, it's not going to make us enough money. I just truly should have made that, like, you know, Captain America 4 and then Captain America 5 coming out, Brave New World. So in my opinion, I think Hawkeye would have been fine as a movie, but I think it wouldn't have benefited as much as other MCU properties. Now, in terms of Kingpin, it's a good question, because I think that it is a little bit jarring that he comes out at the end and, you know, just kind of is there in the last episode and then gets shot and obviously is coming back and all that kind of stuff. But I don't find it particularly jarring. And maybe that's mostly because the show that came before it with Loki, and we're not going to talk about Jonathan Majors and all the stuff that's going on with him, but, you know, just the character of He Who Remains, I think that was jarring. I think that show could have done without him. But I think that I found Hawkeye's inclusion of Kingpin a little bit less jarring, because I don't think the focus was necessarily on, you know, I think it works just as well to say that there is a guy at the top here. And it turns out to be Kingpin, and that's fine. And it's not the Kingpin from Daredevil, but, you know, neither is Daredevil, is the guy from Daredevil. It's a different universe. And so I'm personally fine with both Hawkeye being a TV show and with having Kingpin. Thanks for that question. And the last question from Duskcast Knight is, what are your thoughts on the state of the DCU? So I'm guessing this is the future DCU under James Gunn, based only on comic book knowledge and excitement. That's a great question. I mean, so the first thing I should say and repeat is that I loved the Suicide Squad. And look, I am not the biggest fan of the Guardians trilogy, and that's not to say I don't like the movies. I actually enjoy every single one of them very much, very, very much. But they never, none of the three of them ever transcended that love this movie. You know, this is one of my favorite movies in the MCU. Like, none of them ever really got to that level. So I mean, I think that's worth pointing out, just to say that I think that James Gunn is an incredibly solid filmmaker. I did love Peacemaker, though, I will say. And so everything I've seen James Gunn do in the comic book movie space has been just really incredible. And so that's number one, to say that I think I have a lot of confidence in James Gunn and his vision for Superman Legacy, but also his vision for the DCU. So that's the first thing. Now, I'm not a prolific comic book reader. I frankly haven't read that many myself, but I watch a lot of the videos about, like the new Rockstar videos and all that kind of stuff about explaining the comic books and explaining what's going on there. And, a lot of the things that James Gunn is about to do are maybe not as well known. Some of the things he's going to do are more well known. Things like, Booster Gold is maybe a more popular thing in DC, and things like, Green Lantern with Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. That's gonna be exciting. Obviously, everyone's wanted Jon Stewart in the DCU for a while. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I'm not nearly as familiar with, but it sounds very cool based on what I've heard about the comic book. And then things like The Authority, and Creature Commandos. I frankly just don't know that much about them. And so, the comic book side of that, I don't quite have much to base off of, but really my excitement for the DCU is that A, it's not the current DCEU, which has just been aimless for a long time, and it's just been really hit or miss. And by the way, say what you will, for example, about a movie like Black Adam or Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I enjoyed both to an extent. Black Adam maybe less so than Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Shazam 2, I think, was fun and enjoyable, and so there's that. But, the DCEU has just been meandering for such a long time. And so I'm just excited for a fresh start. I'm really excited to see where James Gunn decides to build this DCEU from the ground up. I think that's really where I'm most excited about. Thank you so much, Duskcast Knight, for all those great questions. Again, I'm sorry I'm butchering your name every single time I say it, but I appreciate you asking so many questions and so many awesome questions. Thank you so much again. And our final set of questions, and there are a lot of them again, which is amazing, by the way. Silver Screen Edits YouTube says, first question up, another DC-related question, which is great. Now that the DCEU is over, basically, anyways, what was the best part of the franchise? Like a specific character, scene, moment, anything like that? So that's a really good question, because while the DCEU, as it stands, and it's still going, by the way, it will be still going until Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom comes out, it's been very hit or miss for me. And on top of being very hit or miss, it has been basically mired in controversy from day one. And it's, what to me, and I'm not going to make Marvel DC comparisons. This is not a comparison for competition's sake. I promise you that. But I'm just making a comparison to the other big comic book movie studio just to say that it's incredible that the MCU went through its first 10 years, the Infinity Saga, and most of the beginning of Phase 4 as well, really with no controversy. The biggest thing, I know there were little things here and there, right? The biggest thing, though, about the MCU that was controversial was maybe the recasting of Chadwick Boseman up until that point. And then obviously this year it's gotten just crazy with, Jonathan Majors and other kinds of things. So yeah, there's that. So, just to say that I think it's more common to have a studio struggling with a lot of different things, whether it's the actors or whether it's, the productions and things like that. Now, to the extent that the DCEU was struggling with them, I don't know if that's the norm. I don't think so. It doesn't seem like it. But all that to say is that the DCEU has certainly had its ups and downs. But you're asking about the ups, and I think that's a great question. So here's what I'm going to say. And this might surprise you because I had to think about this for a while. I not that there aren't enjoyable things, but nothing that I thought about immediately screamed the best thing about the DCEU. Here's what I'm going to say, though. And it's not every single one, to be fair. It really is not every single one of what I'm about to say. It was the best of the DCEU. But I really loved some of the trailers for the DCEU. And I think that, I think Disney makes some great trailers. I think Marvel makes some great trailers. And I think the Black Panther Wakanda Forever trailer might be like my favorite trailer ever. So take that for what you will. Especially early on, though, I think DC made some killer trailers. Now, there were some really bad ones, right? Like, I think that one Batman v Superman trailer, Dawn of Justice, like that trailer that spoiled literally the entire movie, that was really terrible. I hate that trailer to this day. I don't know why you had to show Doomsday in the trailer. It was that's awful. And by the way, I just want to make it clear, lest anyone think that you think I'm saying, well, the DCU sucks, so I'm just going to say the trailer is like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm going to explain myself, because I think that the reason I love some of the and I'm talking about like that first Suicide Squad, the original Suicide Squad trailer, the really dark and gritty one, and I'm talking about the early Batman v Superman trailers, and some of the Man of Steel trailers were really great. I think even some of the Shazam trailers were really funny, and the trailers for the Suicide Squad, those were great. I think even some of the early Justice League trailers were really quite good, and Zack Snyder's Justice League trailers were quite good. The reason I'm saying this is because it's not to say that nothing about the DCU movies themselves were good, and therefore I'm going to say that the trailers were good. I think what the trailers did a good job of was highlighting the potential of a lot of these movies, and that's that's not easy to do, because I think it's easy to make a generic trailer, for one. And I think it's also easy to make a trailer that just kind of tries to show everything that's in the movie. But what I loved about the early trailers of the DCEU were that it showed the potential of each of the movies. Like the Man of Steel, what I like about the Man of Steel, which is not my favorite movie of all time or anything like that. I think it's fine. I think it's a decent movie. But what those trailers did is set the tone of this is an existential kind of Superman that's going to explore questions of who he is and what his place is in the world. And the Batman v Superman trailer set up this idea of an alien and a god, and amongst men, and I think that the early Suicide Squad trailers showed the ambiguity of these characters and the darkness, and the Joker, who, like, that first Jared Leto image, I think we all remember that image was not the best thing, but I think that seeing him in the trailer was exciting. I think that seeing the Justice League trailer, the first one, was exciting, and I think that, look, I think that there was so much potential for this DCEU, and that's obviously why it's disappointing. So maybe not the most conventional answer, but that is the answer that I'm going to give. And again, I can probably give you a better answer about like a specific thing in a movie or something like that, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. So thank you for that question. Next question from Silver Screen Edits is, what is your favorite accomplishment since starting your YouTube channel? And that's a great question. There have been just so many things that I've loved about this YouTube channel, from day one, and it's been over 3 years now. And so, I'll give an answer that's not answering your question, and then I'll actually answer your question. So, I mean, one of the things that stands out to me is just, YouTube is such a unique platform because it allows you to see your growth in such a way that not a lot of other things really allow you to, right? Like, sure, if you write a book, for example, like you can see that your first draft is different from your last draft, but YouTube allows you to see how you've evolved, over time. You can watch your early videos and see the thumbnails and all that kind of stuff, and see how different, how much better things are now, what you still need to improve, and all that kind of stuff. So on a sort of a macro level, that's been really exciting for me, is just to be able to see the continued growth of the channel, and like in a personal level, not numbers, but in terms of an individual thing, I still am. I'll give two answers. It's cheating. I know. I'll give two answers though. The first one is ranking literally every single character of the MCU. It's that video that's still on YouTube. It's still on my channel. It has over 10,000 views, but the views are not what I'm talking about. It's more of just the amount of time and effort that was put into that video was, it was astronomical compared to all the other videos. That video is almost 2 hours long. It took, I want to say it took 3 days of recording. Not 3 days straight, obviously, like 3 separate sessions on 3 separate days of recording, which just never happens. And it took, I want to say, 3 or 4 weeks of editing, working on just that one video. Like usually, if I'm busy, I'll work on a video for maybe a few days, like 2 or 3 separate sessions, and I'll get it done. That one video took like weeks to finish that. And so when it first came out, I was so excited about it that I made an announcement video. I said something big is coming. I'm really excited to share with you guys. And that was definitely one of the first things. And the response that it got was amazing. Like I'm so happy that you guys enjoyed that video. And I'm certainly looking into doing another one, because that was, it was a lot of hard work, but it was really fun. The other thing is the biggest video on the channel, almost 25,000 views, which is just crazy. It's crazy to me. And that's the Beginner's Guide to the MCU. Now, the interesting thing about that video is that video doesn't appeal to my quote-unquote base, the community, the Access Blockbusters crew, because all of you guys are familiar with the MCU. I'm presuming most of you guys are, if you're watching the video and you're a subscriber. What that video did, though, is it did something that I hadn't anticipated. It was something that I thought would be useful to post on YouTube and just see, like, maybe someone will find it useful. The amount of people, you can go into the comment section of that video and see just how many people are commenting, thank you just for helping. And it's not me, like, I'm just relaying information that it, is useful. But just as an example, like, thanks for pointing me in the right direction of how to start the MCU. And I've really enjoyed watching the MCU so far, and I can't wait to keep going thanks to your video. And I mean, that is so gratifying. I mean, you have to understand how gratifying that is, just to read comments like that say, you have helped me to fall in love with the MCU. And it's something, like, the MCU is something that I have loved so dearly, and no matter what happens to it now, if it falls and crashes and burns, it will always have a very special place in my heart, And just to hear other people saying that they enjoyed the MCU as much as I do because of videos like mine, that is so gratifying. It is so incredibly gratifying. And so I'm hopeful that that's what this channel can be. Obviously, making videos for you guys, the hardcore fans of MCU content and things like that I'll be talking about Secret Invasion, spoiler discussions, and all that kind of stuff. But also that I can help other people find the joys in life that I do, and that's really what that's all about. So yeah, fantastic question. Thanks for asking it. Third question: where do you see Access Blockbusters a year from now? That's a good question. Summer 2024. Honestly, I mean, I don't have a grand vision for the channel. I think hitting 1,000 subscribers has frankly reinvigorated me a lot to think about a lot of different ways that I can, experiment with different formats on the channel, and that's exciting. Nothing concrete planned, in terms of, like, by next year I want to be X or in Y and Z. I want to find a way to, and this is going to be much more than a year, I think. This is going to be me sort of thinking about, like, where I am in life in general, and thinking about how to make YouTube a sustainable thing moving forward. For those of you who don't know, I'm a full-time student right now. And so, but that won't always be the case, obviously. And so I'm thinking about, as life changes and things go on, that, what happens? How do I make YouTube more sustainable? And one of the avenues that I think will allow me to do that is podcasting. And podcasting is really fun for me. I like editing. I'm not the best editor. I'm more than happy to admit that. And I think that, it's not always easy to record like a 20-minute video. It takes maybe 45 minutes or so, or record just a podcast in an hour and a half or so. And then, that's good and all. But if you make like a 15-minute audio video, for me, that entails like 2 or 3 hours at least of editing. And it's fun, it's fun in its own way of, like, grinding it out and finding the funny moments and things like that. But it's not the reason I started YouTube, right? And so I'm thinking a lot about where the channel can go in terms of podcasting and still making YouTube videos that I enjoy and that I hope you will enjoy. And so maybe a year from now, I will have, continued to work on those things and make those a reality. For the time being, though, I'm just sort of rolling with the punches, and just as long as I can, deliver the kind of content that you guys enjoy, and the kind of content that I enjoy making, that's all that matters to me. So, great question. Next question up is, do you think that we have lost the quote-unquote standalone film as many movie companies seek for their own cinematic universes and franchises today? That's an interesting question. I think yes, and I think no. Because the no part of that answer is, well, I mean, have you seen the Oscar movies, right? Those are huge movies. Some of them even make a ton of money, I mean, obviously, like a Top Gun Maverick is a sequel, but And Everything Everywhere All at Once made quite a bit of money for an A24 film, for example. You have your Parasites, your Marriage Stories, your Jojo Rabbits. I'm just thinking of all the movies from that year for some strange reason. I have no idea why. I think that was 2019. Anyways, I think that was the year. The reason I'm thinking about all those movies is because that was the year I intentionally tried to watch all the Oscar movies. I haven't done it since, not because I don't want to, but just because I haven't had time to. I will again. But anyways, like, you have those movies, and they will always have a place in cinema, for sure. Like, I think like 95% plus of Oscar nominated movies, and in terms of like the best picture category, are not franchise films at all. And so I think, you have those films. Like, they're not dead. They're there. But if you're talking about big studios, right, and you're talking about just the big major, money makers, if you want to say, I think that is fair. to say. I actually recently in a podcast episode talked about this, where I talked about, I talked about the idea that, like, what's the point of the Disney live action remakes? And I think that that's a prime example of that, right? Like, Disney could be making tons of original content. They're not, but it's, they're remaking all their old films. And it's a hard question, because I think that it's obviously getting to a point where, you have DC, you have Sony wants to make a cinematic universe with the Spider-Man characters, you have Marvel, but also these things make money, and we tell these studios that we like these things, and we do. It's just important also, I think, to also acknowledge that every time Disney or Pixar, for example, makes an Elemental, which I really like Elemental, I think it's quite a cute and nice film, that we go out and support those movies, we can support our Dials of Destinies and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3s and Superman Legacies and all that kind of stuff. But when these studios make solid, good movies on their own that are just standalone, right? Like you're talking about your Disney's making like standalone animated films and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important that we go support them. I think that's how they can turn into franchises, and that's really successful for them. But I think that, and again, it just shows you where our mindset is as consumers as well, not just their minds as producers, if that makes any sense. But that's a really good question. Next question up from Silver Screen Edits is, what is your most anticipated movie releasing this year and why? And I'm going to assume you mean for the rest of the year. And for the longest time, it was Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer looks incredible. And then I saw the first reactions to Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, this isn't a fair question, because I haven't yet seen the reactions to Oppenheimer, and so maybe Oppenheimer will get 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and everyone says this is the best film ever made, and all that kind of stuff. Again, Oppenheimer. So excited for Oppenheimer. But, guys, this might be a moot point, because we'll see how long it takes for me to edit this video. I'm recording this video on Friday, July 7th, and at the time of this video, there are 140 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, and it's at a 99%. That's crazy. That's crazy. So it's cheating, and it's coming out in a week, so it's really cheating. But I would have to say Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. But, again, the other obvious choice is Oppenheimer. I'm just so excited for Oppenheimer, so can't wait for that movie. Number 6, do you believe the MCU's future is bright, or do you think that superhero fatigue will set in? That's a good question. I think that both can be the right answer, but I think here's the thing, right? If, let's just say, I just want to put this out here, right? Let's just say, in a dream world, that the pandemic never happened, that the movies and shows were going to release in the order that they were supposed to, like when Kevin Feige first announced Phase 4 in 2019 at Comic-Con. And let's just pretend that none of the actors are mired in controversy, all that kind of stuff. So let's just assume that everything went according to the original plan. But let's also assume that it was the exact same product, right? So WandaVision as it stands, as WandaVision released, that kind of thing. I think we would have a little, I think we would still be frustrated with the MCU, but I think that we would have maybe a little bit more hope in the MCU, because the machine has kind of continued to go on, right? And I think that superhero fatigue will set in eventually, but I think that there are always things that can reset it, right? I think James Gunn resetting the DCU will go a long way in restoring people's excitement for new Superman stories and things like that. I really do. I really do believe that. I think that the MCU is just in a ridiculously difficult spot because of things like controversy surrounding their main actors, because of things like the writer's strike pausing and delaying productions, because of the pandemic that pushed around all their schedules, that I think it was behind when it started Phase 4, if that makes sense, and it never got its footing. And I think that, there are other issues going on there. I think that they needed to really scale down their quantity and focus on their quality. And I'm hoping that they're going to do that this year. They're releasing only, I think, 3 movies and 2 shows, something like that, 3 shows, something like that. So that's encouraging to me. Look, I think that the MCU's future is still very bright. Is it as bright as it was at the height of the Infinity Saga? No. But I think there's a way in which they can close out the multiverse saga in a very solid fashion. Maybe not as spectacularly as Infinity War and Endgame, and then move on and tell other exciting stories. The X-Men are still out there. And I have posted a video about this on the channel as well. I think that phases 7 through 10 is going to be the Mutant Saga. So we'll have to see about that. But I think that there is still a lot of potential with the MCU. And I think that superhero fatigue can set in, but I think there are also ways that the MCU can surprise us as well. So... And finally, the last question from Silver Screen Edits is, what is your favorite film or TV show and why? So I've already answered sort of the favorite film part. I mean, not really, but some of my favorite films. I'll answer the favorite TV show part of this question to wrap up this video. It's one of my, it's a favorite topic of mine to talk about sort of outside of the channel, because I frankly don't think that many people on the channel are that interested in this show. My favorite show of all times is Friends. And it's funny because I didn't grow up watching Friends in the 90s. I stumbled upon Friends on HBO Max, I think it was. Yeah, HBO Max, and just fell in love with the show. There's something about sitcoms that appeal to me on that level of the episodic nature of television, just coming back to characters that you love and adore and watching them be really funny. There's no single show that I can still rewatch episodes of and laugh that hard. It's remarkable. Like, I don't laugh that much, actually, during movies and TV shows. I just don't for some reason. But not to say I don't find things funny. I just, for whatever reason, like the physical manifestation of laughter doesn't happen as much as I would think it does for other people. But Friends, just something about Friends makes me laugh. It's like, it's such a comfort show to me. And I acknowledge that later seasons get, worse than earlier seasons and all that kind of stuff. But look, I mean, like, there's something to be said about a show that just makes you feel good, no matter what episode you're watching. Just, it's a comfort show for me. And so, I love Friends. I know that probably the demographics who are watching this video, the age groups that are watching this video, probably don't love Friends as much or haven't even watched Friends, and that's fine. Don't love sitcoms, probably. I am a huge fan of sitcoms. And I wish that there were more that were made today. Unfortunately, that's not what people want on streaming services. But yeah, that's my plug. If you want to check out Friends and if you like it, let me know in the comments. And be love to, maybe make a couple videos about Friends in the future. Who knows? Yeah, that's my favorite show. And guys, that will do it for all the questions you guys submitted for the AMA. I know this video is super long. It's almost a podcast length episode. But I appreciate you guys so much. These questions were amazing. These questions were so fun to answer. I'm going to try to edit this video as quickly as I can, and it's probably not going to have a ton of video clips. It's just going to be some pictures and things like that as I talk about the answers. But I appreciate you guys so much. 1,000 subscribers doesn't mean anything without the kinds of people that are subscribed. And again, it's amazing to see where we've come, and I'm excited to see where we go from here. So actually, let me know in the comments also if you'd like to see more AMAs. I'd love to do some more, and yeah, can't wait for that. So in the meantime, guys, make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. Let me know in the comments what you enjoyed from this video. If you have more questions for me, leave them in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.